inspiration. Right about now where I lose my patience. If I ever need inspiration, right about here's where I lose my patience. Do it now, to make you feel and run. My God, this one is to make you feel and run. My God, this one is
Rayman 3 was released all the way back in 2003. A couple of years later, Ubisoft began work on Rayman 4, which was said to be a really good looking platformer in the same vein as Rayman 3 for the Nintendo Wii. Unfortunately, Ubisoft opted to shift the game completely away from Rayman's platforming roots, and instead, Rayman 4 was changed to Rayman Raving Rabbids, a minigame compilation. This spanned into its own series, which eventually dropped the Rayman name altogether and only focused on the Rabbids. 4 years passed. From 2006 to 2009, 4 Rabbids games were released. It had been more than 5 years since the traditional Rayman platformer was released on consoles. It appeared that Ubisoft had given up on what was originally one of the company's main mascots. However, E3 2010 brought fantastic news for Rayman fans. Ubisoft revealed Rayman Origins, a downloadable episodic title set for release on the PlayStation Network and the Xbox Live Arcade, and was to return to its 2D roots. The game was only being worked on by a team of 5 people. It was to be released at Christmas 2010, but this date came and went, without Rayman Origins. The dearth of information hit, and hopes for the game's release fell flat. But in May 2011, it was revealed that Rayman Origins was alive and well, but has now been expanded to a full retail release, and is being worked on by a full development team. In November 2011, Rayman Origins was released for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 and Nintendo Wii. So the first thing I want to talk about is one of the best things about this game. That is the art style. Everything that you see in this game has been completely hand-drawn. The art designers did an excellent job of giving this game a really childish and pure feel, in the best way possible. And since a lot of people playing the game would have experienced the original Rayman as a child, it really takes you back to that feeling of being a kid again. It really gives meaning to the title Rayman Origins. They also achieved this childlike feel with the sound in the game. The characters have voices, but don't speak English. At first I thought it was gibberish, but then I later realised that they're actually talking in backslang, which sounds kind of odd. The music in this game is unlike anything you'd hear in any game, featuring really strange instruments like the kazoo and the ukulele, instruments you just wouldn't normally hear in a video game. It sounds so childish. Everything in this game contributes to the overall atmosphere of the game, which is super bright and cheerful. And with all of the gritty games that were released during this time, this makes Rayman Origins stand out a lot. Like old school platformers, the story is super simple. Honestly, it's so simple that I can't even tell what it is. Rayman and his friends randomly get imprisoned and then set out to save the nymphs of the land and the Electoons. That's really all there is to it, throughout the whole game. So it's been 7 years since Rayman's last proper adventure. Has he changed at all? Well, not really. Like in the first game, he starts off with few abilities, but is awarded with more throughout the game. He even gains some that he couldn't use in his first 2D adventure, such as the ability to run up walls and swim. Yay! But, of course, he gains familiar abilities like the power to fly. But one ability he isn't allowed in this game is the ability to shoot his fists. Instead he just punches in front of himself a little. Meh, that kinda sucks. He also controls very smoothly in this game. The developers have nailed the controls, and if you die, it's your fault. This game requires patience, so make sure you're not constantly holding the run button unless you're going for speed runs. So, his look, controls and abilities are all great as usual, but I know what you all want to know about the most. His victory dance. What is it like in this game? Well... Come on, Rayman, what is that? The idea of the game, like any side-scrolling platformer, is to traverse from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen. But there's more to do than just that. The game features over 60 levels which you can access through the game's hub world, which is similar to the first Rayman's. There are 4 different themed worlds that you will find yourself playing through. However, the game doesn't throw them at you all at once. In fact, you have to take 2 trips around the map screen before you finish the game. And on your second trip, you'll be playing through the same worlds but different levels. I guess this, in a way, helps keep the worlds from feeling stale. The levels are split into rooms full of platforms, puzzles and enemies to defeat. There are also alternate paths that lead to rooms with cages in them. Cages play a larger role in this game than they did in previous games, as you need to collect a certain amount of electrons throughout your journey to unlock the paths to further levels. In the earlier levels this is a pretty easy task as they're not hidden too well, but it progressively becomes more difficult to locate them. Not only that, you also get scored at the end of the level for collecting a certain amount of yellow lumps throughout the level, and in turn are rewarded with more electrons. This can prove to be difficult as there are only just the right amount of lums in a level for you to be given the highest award. But you can't just collect them. You have to collect them in a certain sequence, combined with yellow lum kings, which give you 2 lums for every 1 you collect. But since some levels have less than 350 lums in them, you have to utilise the lum kings perfectly in order to get the max score. It sounds difficult? It is. Speaking of difficulty, you only get 1 hit in this game and you're dead. Just 1, unless you find a heart which gives you an extra 1. So you have a potential to have 2 hits in this game. That's even more merciless than the original Rayman, which was hard enough. That's why I said this game requires patience. If you rush through, you will die. Luckily checkpoints are extremely frequent though, so the game's still somewhat accessible to people who aren't experts at platforming games. But boss battles are a whole different story. You will not beat them first try by luck, I guarantee. You have to spend a bit of time just dying in order to memorise their pattern before you can succeed. I personally wasn't a huge fan of the boss battles in this game. They were designed really well, but can be a little frustrating to try to beat. Here's a random question. Do you like shoot 'em ups? You remember that one level in the first Rayman where a mosquito known as Bzit came to help you out? Well, this game features a lot of these levels, and I mean a lot. Probably over a quarter of the levels in this game are these levels, but they're much different to that one level in the first Rayman. In this, they're actually proper, fully fledged shoot 'em up stages. They play out as you'd expect from any horizontal shoot 'em up games. The screen is constantly scrolling, and all you've got to do is shoot the enemies and avoid projectiles and walls. They're actually a lot of fun as well, and become really hectic toward the end of the game. Not as hectic as a bullet hell shooter, mind you, but you get the idea. There is one thing that completely changes up how the game is played, and that's the multiplayer mode. The game allows for up to 4 players to drop in and drop out at will. And this is through the main story, so you can play throughout the whole game with 1 player, 4 players, or change it up on the fly. You can take the role of Rayman, Glowbox, or a Tinsy, or you can double up. You also unlock more costumes for all your characters as you gain more electrons, which can be used in single player or multiplayer. The game isn't changed in any way during multiplayer, except that there are more people on screen. This makes the game a whole lot easier. If a player dies, they turn into a bubble, and can be popped by other players, which brings them back to life. Not only does it make the game easier, it makes it so much more hectic. With multiple players, you can rush through levels without thinking twice. This is just so much fun to do as the pace of the game quadruples and just becomes insane. You can play cooperatively and try to work together to progress through the levels, or, and this is the more fun option, you can just say screw it and play every man for himself style. You can jump on your teammates and push them around as you try to race to be the first person to the goal. Either style you choose to play, it feels a world different to the single player mode. And despite the gameplay and levels being identical in single player and multiplayer, they are played extremely differently and just feel like completely different games. In my opinion, Rayman Origins is one of the best multiplayer platformer games, and I actually think it's better than New Super Mario Bros. Wii. This game really is a blessing for long-time Rayman fans. There were just so many references to not just the first game, but the second and third as well. There are tons of familiar characters come back from the older games, friendly faces as well as unfriendly faces, but they've done it in a humorous way. The Livingstones are back from the first Rayman game, but they're all old. This game is a complete throwback for Rayman fans, but it's not only that. It manages to retain an old school feel, while also being modern and relevant to people who perhaps have never played a platformer game before. And if that is the case, Rayman Origins is a great starting point. I definitely recommend this game to any platformer fans, or fans of old school games. You should definitely check out this game if you haven't already. This is the perfect game to bring Rayman back into the spotlight, and I'm so glad that they're taking the series even further. But at this point, how can they possibly do better than Rayman Origins?